本節目內容只代表個別嘉賓及主持個人意見，並不代表本台立場。
好，又嚟到我哋 House of Light 嘅節目啦。咁今次呢，就亦都係喺我坐我側邊呢，有一個大家好熟悉嘅一把聲啦。係邊位呢？出下聲啦！
點？我係 Louise， 我今日又係嚟做翻譯嘅。今日 ，hello。
其實佢已經係我哋其中一個司儀嚟嘅，呢個主持。OK， 咁係啦，咁又係阿 Louise 啦，即係幫我哋做翻譯嘅。咁點解會做翻譯咧？因為今日亦都有一個即係喺海外澳洲嚟到香港嘅其中一位導師啦。咁佢就係叫 Zeo。Hi Zeo。
Hi everybody.
How are you?
I'm good.
係啦，咁講少少 Zeo 個 background， 咁其實佢喺香港咧都幾 active 嘅，即係佢會喺New Age Shop 啊，亦都喺Shirley Healing Circle 啊，亦都喺我哋即係其實佢係喺香港咧，其實都好幾年㗎啦，咁都係喺唔同嘅中心咧係幫人哋做 channeling 嘅。咁我知道咧，即係有好多人對 channeling 即係又有興趣啦，但係又唔知咩嚟啦，又可能會有啲誤解啦。咁今日就特登請阿 Zeo 嚟咧去講一講，即係究竟係啲乜嘢嘢嘅。OK， 好啦，咁我問問題㗎咯。I'm going to ask question. Yeah. OK， 咁第一個問題我會想問下 Zeo 咧，咁不如叫佢去介紹一下自己啊，即係佢 background 係啲乜嘢嘢
Okay. Zeo, would you like to introduce yourself a bit about your work and your background a little bit?
Sure. My name's Zeo Sheehan and I'm from Australia. I'm based in Australia, even though I travel the world pretty much constantly. What is my background? I've had in my life I've had two parallel educations, one as a designer and one as a spiritual practitioner.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in Hong Kong for a couple of weeks.
OK， 咁Zeo 咧就啱啱咧就係介紹佢自己啦，就係佢係本身佢喺澳洲度嚟㗎啦，佢都係澳洲人啦。咁而同一時間咧，其實咧佢係有做緊兩種同時間做緊兩個工作嘅，一咧就係一個設計師啦，第二咧就係做一啲身心靈嘅工作嘅咁樣。咁佢就今次咧佢嚟香港咧，咁佢就會係逗留幾個星期啦。咁而事實上咧，佢雖然係澳洲人啦，但係其實佢都係已經周不時就已經係周遊列國。我哋嚟之前就已經講佢係去過好多唔同嘅國家㗎啦，已經。
咁去即係佢我都會想知道咧，因為佢自己本身都係做 channeling 啦。咁佢其實個 journey 即係點解佢會做呢一樣嘢？因為聽佢講，佢都有做 designer 嘅工作。點解唔做 designer 會即係又會對呢一方面有興趣咧
？Okay. So what makes you, would you please talk more about your spiritual journey? Because you have just mentioned you are also a designer. So normally people will just focus on just being a designer. But what makes you to have two parallel paths?
I think it all started with me getting into Buddhism when I was in my 20s. And my interest really became much larger once I had a first-hand experience in spiritual practice. And right from the beginning, I was always interested in healing and helping people. So it was a gradual transition.
咁啱Zeo 咧就講啦，佢話其實咧佢喺佢20零歲嘅時候咧，咁第一次就接觸到即係佛家即係佛學嘅思想啦。咁然之後佢話當佢真真正正自己親身去接觸嘅時候咧，佢就越嚟越覺得個興趣就越嚟越濃厚，而亦都咧係俾好多一啲關於療愈嘅工作療愈嘅方法啦，去深深咁吸引住。咁所以佢就慢慢咧就去加深咗佢對於靈性呢條即係身心靈療愈嘅路啦，咁就慢慢就加深佢嘅興趣，咁所以就變咗其中一樣佢會做嘅工作啦。
咁佢嗰時即係我會想問啦，即係佢嗰時有冇話即係接觸邊一個人去即係 inspire 到佢要行呢條，或者佢有冇學過，即係會唔會係學咗啲嘢，或者經歷咗即係一件事令到佢即係覺得我就要 行呢條路啦咁。
Okay. So is there any person or any people inspire you and give you like a push to get into the spiritual path?
Well, for me, it happened very quickly. I was an atheist for 20 years. And I guess I got to the point where I felt there must be more about life than just all the material things. So I can't really say that anyone pushed me. It was just that it occurred naturally and through experience. The experience was always my driver. So if something felt great, I would just explore a little bit more. And if something gave me mixed feelings or mixed results, I would just not continue in that direction.
咁啱啊，Zeo就講佢話，畢竟咧，佢嗰陣時佢就話我一路以嚟咧，我都冇乜話邊一個特別一個人物啊，或者係發生咗啲事啊，去令到我去刺激到我要去探索一下呢一個靈性嘅道路。佢畢竟我活咗大約20零年，做咗20零年人啦，就覺得生命應該唔止係咁樣嘅。咁於是咧，佢就決定就再去周圍去探索一下。佢話而第一手嘅經歷咧，對佢嚟講佢係要好需要第一手嘅經歷嘅。咁所以佢慢慢去探索去求證嘅時候咧，就慢慢就知得越嚟越多。咁佢話佢嘅習慣就係，如果當一件事佢越做越起勁有興趣嘅時候，佢就會繼續去探索落去啦。又或者係如果相反地嗰件事係俾咗佢一啲好奇怪或者係即係好兩極化嘅一啲嘅答案嘅時候咧，咁佢就會唔再做嗰件事噶啦。咁佢話，所以佢嘅靈性嘅旅程其實可以話係慢慢發生出嚟嘅。
咁我見過即係佢個 bio 啦，我知道佢係即係讀過唔同嘅嘢啦。咁我都想即係聽下，即係佢其實讀過啲乜嘢嘢，同埋我知道佢有一個學校係幾得意，好似叫 Mystery School 咁樣嘅。咁其實係咩嚟嘅咧
？Okay, Zeo, from what we have read about you in your bio, so we saw a lot of different schools you have attended to. Would you like to introduce us to a few of them? And one of them in particular we are interested is the mystery schools. Would you like to talk about it more?
Sure. Well, really, when I started with healing, I started with Reiki, and the basic principles about the energy body, the chakras and the aura, etc. Did courses about that were quite in depth. And the mystery school is really a more dedicated training where for 1 year you spend 10 to 20 hours a week really focused on deepening your meditations, clearing your energy, opening your energy, and really transforming a lot of your karma in a very short amount of time so you can become a more pure vessel ultimately for spirit.
咁就啱Zeo 咧就講佢話佢其實佢之前咧其中學過嘅兩樣嘢啦。咁佢就係第一就係靈氣啦。咁靈氣咧其實就係俾佢初去接觸究竟乜嘢叫能量啦，或者係一啲唔同嘅 energy body 啦，一啲身體上面唔同嘅能量啦，亦都有接觸到 chakras， 即係一啲嘅能量中心啦。咁而另外一樣咧就係啱啱提到嘅 mystery schools 咧，其實就係另一樣好唔同嘅嘢嚟嘅。咁就係需要一個整1年嘅一個學習啦。咁同埋每一日咧，其實每一個禮拜咧就需要係10至到20個鐘頭嘅練習啦。咁當中係包括有好多唔同嘅冥想啊，又或者係佢要學識點樣去將自己一啲唔和諧嘅能量啊，可以去清理好啊，等到自己咧可以更加同個宇宙係有更加清晰嘅一個嘅聯繫，咁就可以加強嗰個療癒嘅作用啦。
咁我知道佢即係亦都係因為我做過佢嘅 session 啦，即係佢嘅 channeling 啦嚇。
我都有。
咁咧，我見佢咧會成日都講一啲叫做 Ascension Master 嘅。咁嗰啲係咩嚟嘅咧
？Okay， 咁because both of us have been to your sessions before, and you have mentioned about Ascended Masters. So would you please explain to our audience a little bit more about who are they?
So in my understanding, when you ascend, it means that you transcend your karma here on the planet, which means, and ascension is always connected to enlightenment. So it means you can choose whether you return to the earth or not. You've moved on, basically. You've moved to a consciousness of unconditional love. And we know in many cultures all those beings that represent that type of consciousness. In some cultures it's Buddha, Krishna, Christ, etc., Kuan Yin. So there are many beings that exist on this level of consciousness, and in some traditions they're referred to as ascended masters because they've mastered their initiations, they've mastered the challenges that come when we're here on the earth.
OK， 咁啱啱阿 Zeo 咧就解釋咧，佢就話 Ascended Masters 咧其實就都係一啲已經係靈性上面已經係提升咗去到某一個層次嘅一啲嘅 beings， 一啲嘅靈魂嚟嘅。咁而呢一啲嘅靈魂其實佢可以去到，即係佢去到呢一個嘅層次咧，其實佢可以選擇去繼續去佢嘅道路啊，定還是係翻嚟地球去繼續去過佢嘅即係有身體嘅生活。咁而其實喺有好多我哋熟悉嘅一啲嘅名稱啦，都係一啲嘅 Ascended Masters 嚟嘅，例如譬如耶穌啊、佛陀啊，或者係觀音啊等等。咁而因為佢哋點解叫做即係 Ascended Masters 咧？其中一個原因就係因為佢哋已經係經歷咗喺地球上面一啲嘅，佢哋 master 咗經歷咗一啲喺地球上面一啲有實質身體嘅一啲挑戰，咁而佢哋經歷咗已經完成咗，好似畢咗業咁樣啦。咁所以咧，佢哋就可以去到另外一個層次，咁就可以去有陣時就會可以去支持翻我哋俾翻一啲有用嘅一啲嘅指引俾我哋咁樣咯。
咁實質即係有即係嗰啲 Ascended Master 啦，咁會有啲邊類嘅，或者會唔會有分咩等級啊，或者會唔會有啲咩嘅工作崗位咁樣嘅
？OK. Are there any specific gradings for the Ascended Masters, or there special duties for each of them, like hierarchies?
It is definitely a hierarchy, and there's definitely a system. So each being has a certain responsibility, and as they evolve, of course, those responsibilities change as well. I'm a very we should say maybe sometimes I'm a little bit slack in what I learn about them, because I'm just doing my job. I don't always research who I work for, which is probably not such a great thing. But so I can't tell you the great amount of details about that. But what is important for me is that they all exist on a level of consciousness that is beyond duality.
OK， 咁啱啱阿 Zeo 講啦，佢就話其實佢一定係有一啲特定嘅層次、唔同嘅層次同埋唔同嘅工作崗位啦。咁佢話通常咧，因為即係佢就係一個比較順其自然嘅一個人啦。咁所以佢話而家我就冇好話未必可以好詳細咁去解釋俾大家聽，究竟佢哋每一個唔同嘅人專係負責係乜嘢嘢。咁可能如果呢個係對於我自己嚟講嘅一個個人經驗，我 as Louise 嚟講一個個人經驗就係，因為好多時候咧 Zeo 咧佢會去到你同佢喺個 session 裏面咧，咁就會佢會到其時自然嗰個 Ascended Master 都會話俾我哋聽，係佢會負責去 support 我哋，支持我哋啲乜嘢嘢。咁而其實啱啱 Zeo 亦都講到就係話，佢話因為係咁樣就係，所以其實因為佢哋每一個 Ascended Master 都有佢哋唔同嘅層次同埋佢負責嘅崗位，而根據佢哋去慢慢佢哋自己去提升自己嘅能量嘅時候咧，佢哋負責嘅崗位或者負責專長咧都會有所改變嘅。咁所以亦都係另一個原因咧，就係好難話呢個就負責係乜嘢，嗰個就負責乜嘢，所以係真係要好係喺嗰一刻你面對住嗰個 Ascended Masters 嘅時候咧，你就可以真係真正去感受得到。
咁我想問咧，即係如果佢係幫人做嘅時候啊，係當嗰個人即係個 client 嚟到嘅時候，佢會即係好似channeling 去睇下究竟嗰個客有啲乜嘢嘅 Ascended Master 喺背後去話俾佢聽，跟住佢直接去講俾個客聽啊？定係佢自己本身可能佢有一啲 Ascended Master 喺佢側邊，然後講一啲 message 俾佢聽啊
？Okay. So when there is a client come to have a session with you, usually you will you will just assign an ascended master to the clients according to their needs or to their lesson, or you have your own ascended masters give you hints and whisper next to your ears and tell you who you are ascending to the clients.
It's really a matter of my mind and my personality stepping out of the way to allow the perfect being to appear. So I don't actually know before I begin, but I know that the being that presents itself is always most appropriate to the learning and the challenges and the lessons of that person. So it's a process of surrender. I always want to know before I begin, but it is only when my mind steps out of the picture that I really get the information.
OK。咁啱啱Zeo就講佢，我都好想咧事先我已經可以知道究竟呢個客人咧係有邊個嘅 Ascended Masters 咧去幫佢。佢但係咧好多時候，如果佢咁樣做嘅話咧，就會令到佢自己影響咗嗰個效果，因為佢令到佢自己嗰個嘅個人嘅性格啦，或者係佢自己嘅睇法咧，去影響咗件事。咁佢話，所以咧，通常佢喺一個嘅 session 裏面咧，佢喺一個諮詢裏面咧，其實佢都會盡量咧去保持一個客觀同埋中立啦。佢啱啱講嘅用字就係令到佢自己可以可以退後一步，等佢自己唔會影響到嗰個結果咯。咁而佢亦都係相信咧，佢係當其時令到咁樣去做法，通過咁樣做法嘅時候咧，佢可以咧真正去 surrender 喺嗰個過程裏面，即係佢可以完全臣服喺個當下嘅狀態。咁而導致咧，佢嗰啲資訊咧，嗰啲資料咧就會更加可以清晰去傳遞到俾個客人去知道，而真真正正可以幫到對方啦。
So an example is if somebody, for example, requires lots of love and compassion for themselves and is going through some upheaval in their life, for maybe Kuan Yin appears because the energy of her unconditional love and compassion comes into the room and supports the client for the time that I am providing information. So that would be one example.
咁啱啱Zeo就舉咗一個例子啦，佢話例如果佢有個客人，佢真係好需要一啲好無條件嘅愛，好慈悲嘅大愛嘅時候咧，咁可能喺咁嘅情況底下咧，咁觀音嘅能量自然咧就會喺嗰間房裏面出現，然之後去支持住佢對方，支持住嗰個客人。咁佢就話就係一個咁樣嘅例子，就係當其時個客人可能喺佢真正需要啲咩能量嘅時候，好自然呢啲 Ascended Masters 咧，佢就會將佢嘅能量咧就放入呢間房間裏面，或甚至乎佢會嚟到呢間房間去支持住成個諮詢嘅進行噶啦。
呢一個係好得意嘅，因為咧，我記得我同佢即係揾阿Zeo做之前咧，咁我係即係somehow話俾我聽咧，係我唔知邊個同我講啦，定係我係見到觀音個圖像定點樣嘅。咁跟住即係同佢做嘅時候咧，佢一坐低咧，佢就即刻眯埋眼就同我講，觀音喺度啊咁樣。跟住我即刻哇，咁都得。
Okay, there was an example from Shirley, the personal experience. Because one of the times she has a session with you, and before the session, someone told her about something about Guan Yin. And then when she had the session with you, the first thing you close your eyes and say, "Oh, Guan Yin is here."
Maybe you can't remember. So I was amazed. Oh, okay, she's here.
Okay, thank you.
係啦，咁跟住再問翻即係阿Zeo啦，咁我想問下佢，即係佢因為我見佢其中一個 session， 即係其中一個即係服務啦嚇，佢會幫人哋睇 Akashic Record 嘅。咁即係如果係 SRT 嚟講啦，Akashic Record 就係等於靈魂記錄啦。咁我想聽多少少，即係Zeo即係佢嘅講法係代表啲乜嘢嘢咯？即係 Akashic Record。We
know that one of your service is to reading someone's Akashic records. And from our last program, talking about SRT, spiritual response therapy, we knew that Akashic records are for recordings, okay, for everything in our lives. So would you please explain a little bit more in depth about Akashic records from your point of view?
It is true, the Akashic records are like the cosmic data bank where everything is recorded. And my personal experience is my job is to help people clear those imprints in their Akashic records that create reoccurring dynamics that don't serve the soul or that they are ready to clear. So my specialty is to revisit all those experiences that are a little bit more traumatic and lead to difficult patterns. So I don't get to see the great facets of someone's Akashic records. My job is to more focus on what creates challenges and what creates disempowerment in their lives and ultimately struggle.
咁啱啱咧，阿 Zeo 咧就解釋咧，佢就話：佢話冇錯，的確Akashic record 咧其實都係好似一個即係一個記錄咁樣嘅，就記錄低我哋做過所有嘅嘢。佢話但係咧，我嘅工作咧，我就唔係去睇究竟呢個人本身佢嗰個即係呢一個記錄裏面佢有幾犀利有幾犀利，而係咧我哋主要咧就去睇下究竟有冇一啲嘅烙印啦喺呢個Akashic record 裏面咧係阻住呢個人嘅發展嘅。咁例如去睇一啲譬如可能係一啲創傷係不停一次又一次咁出現，令到真正就會阻住呢個人去發展佢自己。咁所以咧，我哋就會去揾翻究竟呢一啲嘅事件出嚟，然之後可以幫佢清理咗呢一啲事件，清理咗呢一啲能量，將一啲唔支持呢個人嘅成長嘅一啲能量咧，將佢釋放咗。解除咗，咁令到佢可以更加可以活佢自己嘅生命得更加容易咯。
So an example of that would be someone, for example, who's been a monk or a nun for many lifetimes, has made many vows of service, and in this life they struggle to make money, or when they make money it immediately disappears. So that is a classic example of an imprint where people can do whatever they want, but somehow they can't move forwards financially.
This is very interesting because before I met you, I'm talking about this topic with another friend of mine. Yeah. OK. 咁啱啱咧，其實阿 Zeo 咧就講咗一個例子咧，佢就話一個好經典，幾乎係即係近乎係一啲即係 textbook case 嘅例子啦，就係譬如有啲人嘅過去世咧，佢係一啲嘅僧人啦，或者係一啲修士或者修女啦。咁佢哋因為佢喺佢哋嘅生命裏面咧，佢哋係做過好多一啲嘅立過一啲誓咧，就係唔要錢嘅。係啦，唔要物質嘅，咁所以咧，其實佢哋就可能喺佢哋嘅嗰個 Akashic record 裏面就會揾到呢一啲嘅問題，而導致咩影響咧？就係導致咧呢個人咧，佢今世可能佢已經唔再係僧人或者係一啲修女啦，但係佢依然咧有呢一個能量喺度，所以咧就會阻住佢，令到佢冇辦法可以揾好多錢。就算佢揾好多錢都好，最終咧都唔知會點樣使晒，佢哋 keep 唔到錢啊！即係咁，我就啱啱同阿 Zeo 講就話，好得意，因為我啱啱見佢之前咧，我正就係同另外一個朋友啦。咁而佢亦都係有呢一個同樣嘅問題，而佢其實曾經都向我表示過佢曾經喺佢一啲嘅過去世咧，的確都係一啲僧人或者係一啲修士嚟嘅，咁所以就會對錢咧係會有一啲，譬如好似會有罪疚感啊等等啦。
係啊，我想問下，即係其實我諗好多做靈性工作啲人咧，好多呢啲咁樣嘅 belief。咁我記得咧就係阿 Zeo 做嘅時候咧，佢會幫嗰時幫我啦，或者幫啲 client 咧，會清好多一啲叫 contract。即係啲合約啊嗰啲咁樣，咁嗰啲又係咩嚟嘅咧
？Okay, so the example you have just raised actually is a very typical textbook case for people working in spiritual path, and from the session we have with you, we found that you tend to dig out a lot of things called contracts. So would you please explain about what contract is?
So the contract is really a binding energy that at some point you created with your own energy. So for example, let us assume you were a Buddhist monk. So the contract would be between you, your higher self, your essence, and Buddha, or the divine consciousness, and you make a vow to not acquire finance, for example. So that is a binding energy. It is there's many words how to describe this, but it's an energy that remains if you have invested all of your willpower into it. It doesn't leave just because you are changing physical bodies, just because you are leaving the planet and coming back into another body, the binding energy still remains whenever you come back to the earth.
OK， 咁啱啱咧，Zeo就舉咗個例子，關於咩叫合約啦、contract 啦。咁佢就話其實就係一個即係互相捆綁住嗰啲嘅能量。佢話個例子咧就係，譬如用翻我哋頭先個例子，就係可能係一個佛家嘅一個嘅僧人咁樣。咁佢曾經呢個人係曾經係一個佛家嘅一個僧人。咁而喺佢其中一啲過去世，佢亦都係立過一啲約咧，就係話唔可以有即係沉迷物質上面嘅嘢咁樣。咁所以其實佢就係喺佢同埋佛祖之間咧，或者係佢當時嘅師傅之間咧，佢就講立咗一個咁樣話我唔要錢嘅一個嘅合約。咁所以但係咧呢個能量咧，因為係一個好強嘅一個能量嚟嘅，並唔會因為呢個人佢肉身轉化咗，已經唔再係一個佛家嘅僧人啦。佢已經可能嚟到係一個普羅大眾市民咁樣，但係呢一個能量係咁強，仍然響度。咁所以導致咧呢個人咧，佢都係冇辦法咧，可以俾自己可以喺物質上面或者甚至乎金錢上面有好豐足嘅。
So what I really help people to do is I provide the understanding that allows them to make a new choice, because you've created with your energy that binding dynamic, and as soon as you understand why it exists, it's very easy to let it go, because then your choice, because you have free will, your choice can cancel that out again.
咁而 Zeo 喺呢個崗位呢個諮詢裏面嘅工作咧，就係佢幫我哋去了解咗究竟呢一個能量係啲乜嘢嘢，然之後咧就幫我哋可以咧去通過了解咗，然之後可以幫佢釋放咗，令到我哋可以咧更加有一啲新嘅一啲嘅選擇，去選擇唔同嘅嘢，咁變咗就我哋可以行翻一啲自己願意，即係自己覺得好嘅、適合自己行嘅路啦。
So they can vary from all kinds of dynamics. Why do I never have money? Why do I feel isolated amongst humanity? Why do I always have these reoccurring challenges with my mother or my father? Why do I have problems in relationship and it's always the same? It's all the deep-seated reoccurring dynamics that are very familiar at this point, but you probably are sick of them as well.
咁啱啱佢話其實唔單止係金錢嘅，有好多唔同嘅例子，譬如話點解我係成日，例如同人講點解我成日都同錢係好似有仇咁咧，成日都唔可以有好多咧，或者係點解我成日都同一大班人咧係都唔舒服嘅咧，或者點解我成日都會同自己父母家人個關係都好似好奇怪咁咧，點解我成日都喺我嘅感情生活裏面成日都唔鬼多波折㗎咁可能係一啲重複又重複咁樣去發生嘅一啲事件，令到我哋係即係覺得夠啦，唔好再嚟啦，好唔好啊？咁我哋就可以喺一個諮詢裏面咧，都可以去幫大家咧去解決咗呢啲問題佢嘅。
好，呢啲點解咧？我一陣間到第二節，我就想問一問Zeo，我有個問題想問佢。咁而家我哋第一節咧休息一陣先，跟住下一節再嚟講。
OK。
好，咁我哋嚟到第二節啦。咁Zeo仲喺度啦嚇。咁而家頭先咧都講到，即係啲 client 有啲咩問題會問啊，咁Zeo係會即係回答，即係好似 channel 咁去回答佢哋嘅問題啦。咁我想問一問，咁佢 channel 嘅時候，咁點知道嗰啲係一啲 ascension master， 或者會唔會係一啲古靈精怪嘢啊？或者會唔會係佢自己個 mind 即係會答一啲嘢啊咁樣咧
？So we have mentioned about your session knowing you are going to do some channelings for the clients. So how could you know that the one you're channeling is from the higher sources and instead of the what we call ghosts and or even from your own mind?
It's a lot of experience, a lot of practice.
Of course.
And at some point, you become familiar with the energy of those beings, which is a amazingly loving, unconditional, uplifting energy. So there's a clear distinction between my mind, which is filled with junk to some degree, and an energy that is continuously heating up my body and making me feel better. So that is the physical sensation, but the energetic sensation is really a beautiful unconditional love.
咁阿Zeo啱啱就講啦，佢話其實最主要當然就係經驗啦，咁而第二咧就係佢話當一啲呢啲 ascended masters 喺度嘅時候咧，其實嗰個能量上面係好容易變應嘅。佢話因為咧佢哋其實就係你會即刻感覺得到有好多一啲嘅無條件嘅愛啊，一啲嘅慈悲嘅能量啊，係好即係好可以好溫暖，令到佢身體上面甚至乎係感覺得到係真係好暖嘅。咁而同佢自己，譬如可能同佢自己頭腦得翻嚟嘅一啲能量就好唔同，因為佢頭腦有陣時咧，佢的確就會幾雜亂下嘅。咁所以咧，佢話其實久而久之咧，你就好容易就可以認得到邊一位嘅 ascended masters 嚟到，又或者係你好容易就會認得到究竟佢哋係 ascended master 啊，定還是係 from 自己由自己個頭腦而嚟嘅一啲嘅能量啦。
So there's channels for a lot of beings. So some people call this a medium, but it really depends on what level of consciousness you're tuning into. And a lot of my training was for me to really stabilize my channel on the level where I'm truly accessing the consciousness of the ascended beings. So my role is not so much to be a medium for people who have passed on. I'm tuned into one radio station only, and that is the station of the consciousness of the ascended realms.
咁佢就啱啱解啦，佢就話其實有啲人佢都會聽過，譬如啲靈媒啊咁樣。咁佢就話其實點樣去分辨佢做緊嘅工作同埋其他靈媒咧？佢話就話係因為咧，其實就係視乎佢哋去通靈嘅對象。去即係搭通嗰條線嗰個對象，佢嗰個靈魂意識層次去到邊度？咁佢就話佢通常佢去聯繫嘅對象咧，佢都會係一啲喺靈性界面上面能量比較高啲嘅一啲嘅媒體啦。咁所以就係我哋頭先講緊嘅 ascended masters 啦。而一啲嘅靈媒咧，可能佢就會去通靈即係去同一啲可能已經過咗身嘅人啊，去同佢通靈。咁所以咧，其實佢話坦白講咧，如果係同一啲過咗身嘅人嘅通靈咧，並唔係佢嘅強項。佢通常佢會做嘅咧，就係佢會去聯繫一啲可能係能量比較高啲喺靈性界面上面能量層次比較高啲嘅一啲嘅存在體啦，咁去俾資訊俾嗰個客人啦，咁樣。
And of course it takes a degree of education and dedication to get the mind out of the way. So in the beginning stages of my training I really struggled. So I would channel for a little bit, and then of course my mind would come in, censor the stream of consciousness and comment on it and go, this is how can you be sure, and maybe this is wrong, and who do you think you are? So it takes practice to really still the mind and really detach it from being a clear radio station, really.
咁啱啊，Zeo亦都解釋，佢話當然啦，佢話其實係即係佢學嘅時候咧，佢話係需要好多嘅一啲嘅練習啦，同埋訓練啦。佢話佢的確初開始做通靈嘅時候咧，做 channeling 嘅時候咧，咁佢話佢個頭腦咧成日都會介入嘅。例如講唔夠兩句，即係 channel 唔夠兩句嘅時候咧，佢又會自己諗翻，究竟你係邊個啊？你係咪真㗎？你講嘅嘢點好多懷疑跳出嚟。咁佢話所以佢慢慢通過練習嘅時候咧，佢就會可以越嚟越去得到一個好清晰嘅一個嘅聯繫，同佢真係知道係 ascended masters 嘅聯繫，咁佢就會越嚟越清晰同埋越嚟越純粹㗎啦，就會。
咁我就想問下啦，咁Zeo自己本身有冇啲咩 practice 咧
？OK， 你即係日常嘅 practice。OK， so do you have any daily practice, spiritual practice?
I do. I always try to align my energy to my center, and I, of course, cultivate the clarity and the purity of each energy center, so light can pour through me in the most clear fashion. And even if I have a very busy day, I definitely clear myself before a session.
咁佢話有啊，我每一日都會練習咧，去將佢自己嗰個即係嗰個將自己咧去清理啦，令到佢可以咧有同一啲高層次嘅能量啦，可以有一個好清晰、好純粹嘅一個嘅渠道啦。咁等到佢可以成個人咧可以即係可以好着地，同埋可以好 center 佢自己係啦，即係可以好企得穩係啦，可以好穩陣佢自己。佢尤其是咧，當如果佢有一日好忙嘅時候咧，佢更加之會留意啦，去令到佢自己可以更加定翻落嚟咁樣。
咁我想問下，譬如如果喺個 client 個角度啦，咁如果佢乜都 feel 唔到，咁佢去咗 session，咁佢如果覺得佢個腦會覺得啊，我點知嗰啲係咪真嘅咧？咁點算咧？即係如果個客係即係佢有個懷疑喺度，咁會唔會影響嗰個 session 嘅咧？
即係影響個效用。
影響個效果。
So if one client come to your session and he or she couldn't feel anything, and he or she even like doubting the results or the information you have channeled in your session, would that be discounted, the effect of the session?
To some degree, because if your conscious mind and personality rejects the information or is unwilling to listen ultimately, only so much will be practiced and followed up on. So you of course you receive a deeper blessing in the time that you're sitting there, but it is still your choice how much you incorporate that into your life. So the reason people come is because they consciously want to change their life, and if there's a part of them that is resistant or stubborn or doesn't want to create change, I can't do anything about that. It is everyone's choice.
咁啱阿 Zeo 就講啦，佢話當然啦，一個人佢係即係佢肯自己親身嚟到嘅時候，佢已經係即係表示佢係願意做呢個改變啦。佢話但係咧，如果喺個諮詢裡面咧，其實佢譬如可能係有部分嘅佢係佢接受唔接受啊，或者係佢拒絕去接受某一啲嘅資料、一啲資訊嘅時候咧，的確會係令到嗰個諮詢係冇咁好嘅效果嘅。佢話因為有陣時佢話佢嘅工作就係佢去負責將呢啲嘅資訊咧去傳遞俾個客人知啦。但係如果佢有幾開放自己去接受咧，佢就即係冇辦法去管到啦已經。咁如果嗰個人係可以最開放嘅，當然係受惠最多啦。
Yeah, I guess the question is, if you received some recommendations and tips from Buddha, would you at least consider to give it a try? So it really boils down to that question. Are you humble enough to at least consider to give it a shot and to see what the results could be?
咁佢就補充一句就係佢話，例如如果有個人去到佢嘅諮詢裏面嘅時候，咁佛陀親自話俾你聽，有啲嘢你可以試下做嘅。咁如果你真係想對自己嘅生命有改變嘅時候咧，係咪起碼你都可以自己即係試下咧咁樣？咁因為即係畢竟你即係一個你收到呢一啲嘅資訊嘅時候，其實你都係想知道呢啲嘢啫，咁所以佢就話，如果你去到一個咁嘅諮詢嘅時候，其實你可以嘅就係開放自己去，真係起碼都試下啦。
咁我想即係問下頭先佢講咧，就係話幫啲人去做，即係又係好似 SRT 咁做 clearing 啦。咁係咪都係叫嗰啲即係Ascended Master 去幫嗰個人喺佢嗰個 Akashic Record 裏面去 clear 嘅
？So in your session, would it be similar with SRT that we are actually do research in the Akashic records and dig out the non-supportive energy and then just clear it?
Absolutely. It is a combination really of receiving spiritual guidance combined with the clearing of the Akashic records. So the enlightened energies or the ascended beings, they coach you how to complete the process of transformation once the deep imprints are removed.
咁佢話係啊，係兩樣加埋嘅。咁佢就係當然我哋會去睇翻個 Akashic Record 有啲乜嘢嘢係可以掹走嘅，可以清理嘅。而同一時間咧，亦都會請啲 Ascended Masters 咧，咁就去俾一啲指引俾我哋啦。咁令到我哋可以同一時間係會有清理同埋療愈嘅一啲嘅即係事同時間發生啦。
我頭先喺度即係諗到即係有一個關於 trust。咁即係尤其是即係譬如做 channeling 或者做 SRT 都係嘅，有時係唔 trust 嘅喎。咁我想問下，即係 Zeo 點樣去 build 呢一個 trust，令到佢即係好信，因為睇唔到噶嘛，咁你唔知噶嘛，咁佢即係點樣去 build 呢一個 trust 咧
？So this is another big thing for both of us too, because when we practice SRT, just like the same, we have to have the trust between us and our high self. So how could you, or what have you done to build up this trust with the ascended masters all along in your journey?
I would say it's a combination of meditation which brings you into your center. So being centered when you ask the questions and developing an inner response system that tells me this is a yes and this is a no. So when I double check, I get a clear yes or a clear no. And then of course also working with the mind and the parts of your consciousness that have a disconnection from spirit. So in the beginning, there's always a journey of healing involved, where parts of you come and say, I don't want to have anything to do with God. I don't trust God. I've had bad experiences when I trusted God. And it's a degree of healing that needs to occur for your mind to really step back and to allow you to trust. So in the beginning, for example, I used to use a pendulum, and even if I got a clear sign, I used to ask another 3 times. So that's how it began, right? Where I go like, this can't be right. It can't be that easy. And then you get to a point where you're used to being fully centered, and the yes and the no comes instantly. It's just practice, really.
OK， 咁啱阿Zeo就講佢啦，佢話最主要當然就係要練習好多啦，咁同埋好多時候佢就會 keep 住去俾自己咧可以有好着地同埋好着地要即係 keep 住自己去練習好着地嘅感覺啦，令到佢可以咧去更加咧有一個好清晰同 呢啲同 Ascended Master 之間嘅聯繫啦。咁佢話佢最初咧，即係佢話通常佢喺個每一日嘅練習嘅時候咧，佢都會可能係會有一啲答案啊，關於即係定唔係 yes no 嘅答案啦。咁然之後佢可以兩邊咁 double check 啦，重複去檢視啦。咁然之後佢就可以得到一個好肯定係或者唔係嘅答案。咁佢話，但係佢初嘅時候佢都會用零擺嘅。咁佢話慢慢嘅時候，當佢越嚟越練習得多，越嚟越去保持住知道清晰究竟自己個頭腦有冇介入啊，又或者係佢點樣可以保持一個好着地、好 center、好定嘅一個嘅狀態嘅時候咧，佢就越嚟越可以清晰去知道究竟呢啲即係佢個 trust 嗰個信任咧就會越嚟越好噶啦。
And I guess I, like many people, have a scientific education or background, so I don't trust easily. So it took me several rounds of seeing some results, seeing some clients who come back and say, hey, that really changed my life, before my mind started to relax in relationship to feeling we're actually doing something useful here.
That's very important. And 啱啱 Zeo 就講啦，佢話我同好多一啲有即係需要科學數據支持嘅人咧都好似嘅。佢話我的確係開頭嘅時候咧會好懷疑。佢話但係咧慢慢，另外一樣嘢令到我更加肯定嘅咧就係有好多客人嚟完一次又一次，然之後話俾我聽，我俾佢哋嘅答案咧係啱嘅，係準確嘅時候，我就可以更加有大嘅信任啦。
Because when you begin to channel, then information is provided that your mind cannot come up with through your own framework or your own life experience. And so in the beginning I used to say something and then I used to sweat because my mind would come back in at the end of the session and go, I really hope that was accurate because I have no reference in my own life whether that will actually be useful or not.
咁佢就話佢有陣時佢話的確呢啲 feedback 係好有用嘅。佢話因為有好多時候咧喺個諮詢裏面咧佢得到翻嚟嘅 嘅資訊咧，其實並唔係一啲佢好熟悉嘅一啲嘅範疇嚟嘅，可能佢真係講緊一啲佢自己唔會咁樣諗嘅一啲嘅資料嘅。佢話，但係如果當個客人翻嚟話俾我聽，你頭先講嘅嘢真係好幫到我啊嘅時候咧，咁佢就話，佢話的確係好大嘅肯定，係一支好強嘅強心針嚟嘅。因為佢的確佢唔會成日都會用一樣嘅方法去諗嘢，咁佢而嗰啲資訊並唔係如佢平時接觸開咁好似佢咁諗嘅方法。
So in many ways, enlightened beings are like the all-knowing teacher, and the mind is like the fearful school child.
咁佢就話，而呢一啲已經揚升咗嘅一啲嘅存在體，一啲 beings 就好似一啲咩都知道嘅老師，而佢自己本身個人個 mind 個頭腦就好似係一個小朋友，即係咩都唔識，好勁，好對個老師係充滿咗又驚又尊敬咁樣嘅心咁樣。
好啦，咁我想問下佢咧，即係喺佢即係做呢個工作啦，咁其實佢個 intention 係啲乜嘢？即係佢個目的係啲乜嘢嘢
？Okay, so we'd like to discuss more about your work, your spiritual work. So, do you have any intention in doing your spiritual work, the work you're doing now?
Well, I always have an intention to be a clear channel as best as I can on the day. And my other intention is to create more programs that are short programs, short workshops, 2-hour, 4-hour workshops, where I help people to empower themselves. So right now, one of my workshops has to do with helping people draw more of their light into themselves, to anchor their light on a practical level.
OK， 咁Zeo咧就講，佢就話啦，其實佢一路以嚟係做呢一個靈性工作，佢其中一個好大嘅一個意向啦，一個動機意向啦，一個 intention 啦，就係佢希望咧可以維持到係一個好清晰嘅一個渠道去幫到大家啦。另外咧就係可以咧去即係舉辦一啲短期嘅一啲嘅課程啦，咁令到可以幫到其他人咧，可以去即係更加對自己有嘅能量咧，去更加去加深啦，更加信任佢自己啦，同埋可以幫呢啲朋友咧，去將更加多嘅光啦，去帶入佢自己嘅生命裏面，令到佢哋生命過得更加好啦。
咁我想問下，即係其實佢而家，因為我見佢啦，即係會成日都有啲新嘅一啲 workshop 啊，或者新嘅即係 service 咁樣啦。咁佢而家最即係 update 係有啲乜嘢可以即係有啲咩嘅 service 係俾大家咁樣
？Okay, so do you have any latest updates of programs or the service you're going to provide to our friends in Hong Kong now?
Well, I'm doing a variety of short channeled workshops, 2-hour evening programs. One is this Friday at Shakti Healing Center. One is at House of Light. And some longer workshops, 4-hour workshops, where we work specifically on either clearing some of those Akashic records, or we work on connecting more powerfully to the earth, to ground energy. So I've got a whole bunch of things on offer here.
咁佢就話其實我哋呢2個禮拜咧，我哋都會有好多唔同種類、長短唔同嘅一啲嘅 workshop 啦。佢就話包括有一啲係一啲短到2個鐘頭嘅一啲嘅 workshop， 短嘅 workshop 就係同大家去分享下點樣去做通靈啦，教大家點做通靈啦。咁又或者係一啲4個鐘頭比較長啲嘅 workshop 啦，咁就係幫大家點樣去清理自己嘅能量啦，令到大家咧可以更加雙腳着地啦，更加定呢個人，咁佢分別都會喺2個香港唔同嘅地方，一個 Shakti Healing Circle， 一個係 House of Light 去舉行嘅。
OK， 咁去到最尾啦，我想問下 Zeo 有冇啲乜嘢特別嘅 message 想俾我哋香港嘅朋友
？Okay, do you have any special message specifically for Hong Kong friends?
I think for every time I come back to Hong Kong, I notice how busy this place is and how crucial it is for people to reconnect to nature. And I really believe with the inspiration that exists here and the momentum, if people embrace environmentalism or at least nature to a higher degree, this place could even take on a leadership role, I have the feeling, because there's enough education and inspiration present here for people to really move things forward in that direction. I think it's very important for the mind of people to get into a state of deeper balance.
咁佢話咧，佢每一次佢嚟到香港嘅時候咧，咁佢都即係感覺得到咧，香港人的確咧就好忙碌啦。咁佢話佢有個好深嘅感受咧，就係佢會建議大家咧，其實都可以花多啲時間咧喺大自然裏面啦。佢話因為我哋香港其實有一個好一個優勢咧，就係我哋有得到好多一啲唔同程度嘅一啲嘅教育，或者好多唔同嘅資訊。佢話但係咧，的確係需要更加多嘅平衡啦。咁希望大家咧就可以花多啲時間啦，去喺個大自然度感受一下喺大自然環境俾我哋嘅一啲嘅支持啦，同埋一啲能量。咁佢話唔定喺香港的確係可以，即係有一個咁樣嘅平衡之後咧，話唔定香港係的確可以去即係進步到好，可能係就係去一個更加領導層次嘅一個嘅地位啦。
In my experience, nature is a facilitator for people to come into their hearts more powerfully, and really that's where spirit can enter and provide more guidance when people are more connected to their hearts.
佢話其中一個原因就係最主要就係因為當我哋去到大自然嘅時候咧，我哋個心好自然咧就會打開，咁所以喺呢個時候咧，我哋就可以咧更加可以去聯繫到一啲嘅高頻率嘅靈魂啦，令到佢哋真係可以去好好咁去進入我哋嘅生命，令到我哋可以更加清晰，有啲更加清晰嘅一啲嘅資訊啦。佢話因為大自然係成日都會去好似令到我哋可以將我哋嘅心去好好打開咁樣，咁所以我哋可以喺大自然嘅時候咧，就會更加可以同呢個宇宙聯繫啦。
呢個 message 我好需要，
我都係
呢期好忙 ，I'm so busy, recently, and this is a very great message for me. Okay, thank you very much, Zeo.
Most welcome.
係啊，咁亦都多謝 Louise 啦，又再次幫我哋做呢一個翻譯嘅。咁嚟緊咧，我哋會有個 season break 嘅，係啦。咁我諗大家可以即係喺 Facebook 或者喺 花冧 Radio 去即係一路睇住。如果我哋下一節再有嘅時候，會喺website 同埋喺 Facebook 去 announce 嘅。咁好多謝大家，拜拜。
拜拜。